For those who don't know me, my name's Andrew Bullock, and it's a pleasure to be here to open today's Accommodation Australia Economic Workshop at the Adelaide Entertainment Centre. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the strength of the Accommodation Australia in South Australia, acknowledge that from industry voices. Those voices are represented through our advisory committee, and I'd like to thank the AASA advisory committee members that are here today. The time that they give up to represent the sector and advocate for our industry is so important. It's also terrific to see such a strong turnout here today. We've got over 40 accommodation hotels represented, which says a lot about the appetite across the sector for good data, shared insights, and practical conversations about where the economy and the market is headed. And that's really the point of today. The purpose of this workshop is to provide members with detailed economic and accommodation-related information. It's to help them inform forecasting and budgeting and bring together people connected to the visitor economy so we can pressure test what we're seeing and also what we should do about it. The goal is that everyone leaves today having engaged with the content that you'll receive a pack within a week containing the slides, additional insights and a recording of this session. We're also fortunate here in South Australia to have major tourism venues and economic drivers that shape our demand. The Adelaide Convention Centre, our host venue partners here at the Entertainment Centre, and the National Wine Centre, plus many more, are part of today's conversation is designed to cut through the headline narratives and focus on what's actually happening in the numbers on the ground. A special acknowledgement as well. We have Anna Moeller, CEO of the AHASA, here today with us, hosting the Honourable Emily Burke, Minister for Tourism, for a fireside chat. We are very grateful for the Minister's time and the chance to discuss priorities and opportunities for the sector in a frank and constructive way. Most importantly though, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to attend this economic workshop. You're running busy operations, managing costs, labour, guest expectations and demand volatility. So the fact that you're here in person says something about the seriousness of which the industry approaches the next 6 to 12 months. Accommodation Australia SA is proud to host 2 major member events each year, and this is our first major member event for 2026. We're very pleased with this momentum, and across our member network we have over 90 hotels and 8,500 rooms in South Australia. So today is about turning that network strength into a practical advantage for every operator in the room. But before we get into the content, I also want to acknowledge our major event partner. Today's forum is supported by Host Plus, and we appreciate their ongoing commitment to our industry and events like this to help operators make better decisions.
Thank you very much. Before I introduce our next speaker, I would like to acknowledge that the Honourable Emily Burke and her advisor John Dunn have arrived. Thank you for taking time. We'll get to spend a little bit more time with Emily after the afternoon tea break. So, our next speaker, my note here says do an introduction, but I was going to do a bit of a straw poll. Who in this room doesn't know Matthew Burke? It's a bit early to call him an icon, but look, Matt leads STR across the Pacific, as we know, working with hotels and accommodation providers to turn data into decisions. He's someone who doesn't just track trends, he's front and centre with industry, a frequent presenter at all the hotel conferences, and we appreciate him here in South Australia. Insightful, practical and always in the know. Please join me in welcoming Matthew Burke.
Thank you, Ben. I couldn't have written a better intro myself. I don't know, is that your words or is that AI's words? You've got to ask these days. Okay, all right, very good. Like Bessa, I'm going to walk and talk because that thing scares the bejeebers out of me. It's not my style. I wanted to start with a image. And if you're an Ed Sheeran fan, you'll follow along with my little tangent here. This is either the perfect photo, the perfect duet to follow Bessa, or gives you shivers after she has just spoken. But I think it is pretty iconic. I've had the pleasure of seeing Ed twice, once at Accor Stadium on the wonderful privilege of Accor, but they don't have that view out of Sydney. That is only here. We're pretty special to have that in our backyard. I want to start off with a bit of a global view before I'll dig into Adelaide specifically. And I think, it's what we've seen over a long period of time now is that the travel industry at large is very resilient. And you can see this across here, that demand has continued to grow through March, even though, and yes, it is just the first month since the war in Iran and the Middle East conflict there, that we're still posting out a percentage growth of demand across the entire world of travel. Now, that being said, we recorded 1% of growth, and that's even with the fact that pretty much a handful of countries in the Middle East essentially almost went to no demand and had effectively an even steeper fall of demand than what they saw during the onset of COVID. You can see the rest of the world still doing quite well. And pleasingly, that the Americas, and particularly the US, has actually been able to have a pretty strong first 3 months of the year, considering that they've kind of been just tumbling around over the course of 2025 in their demand. So many, many years ago, I would have been sitting at my desk as a revenue manager thinking, oh, this is great, this year's kind of tracking pretty well for us all. And then 1-2 days later, you don't know what's going to happen. As an ironic story, I got back from Japan on the 28th of February, and I sat there because Qantas had a double status credits promotion. So I was there just booking flights like there was no tomorrow. Good timing there in the course that obviously the next day, obviously not in the know and making billions of dollars from oil futures trades. Obviously not that clicky, not that much of an icon, Ben. The Donald Trump's got me on his short list. But obviously it does throw up a lot of curveballs for everyone to understand what might be happening, what are things going to look like over the ensuing future. I think to start with, we have to kind of get some form of perspective. So I'm going to start with Australia, and then I'm going to drill into Adelaide specifically. And you can see that across Australia, the occupancy and average rate growth has been very, very resilient. In fact, quite a strong performance level. We are a country that was one of the first to recover in terms of getting back to sort of what we'd call normalised conditions, and we're still posting out much of this gains. Now, we've had some amazing events come through the entire country, and that's been one of the supporters. But equally as well, there is just consistent demand across multiple segments that's enabled us to be able to post occupancy growth and average rate growth. And when you consider that that is on the backdrop of pretty reasonable supply that's been coming through to the market, and I'll explain a little bit as to why we're now seeing the acceleration of occupancy growth and average rate growth supporting that, is a very, very strong result for the country. But we should have seen this coming, because when you track forward occupancy that we collect from all of you, and thank you for that, you're able to see on the next 28 days occupancy every week, how is bookings looking. And you can see that the darkest teal line there shows you that we were consistently above the 2 prior years in terms of the next 28 days demand. So occupancy, if it continued with the booking pace, was going to exceed what we did the prior year, and the actuals then backed that up in terms of the reality. So you can see that from the forward view. Around the world, global supply is retreating. We've seen a lot of growth in sort of the next wave of hotels, and that is largely from a lot of the developing countries, and there's still a few out there that are building a lot of rooms, but predominantly global growth is slowing down, partially because of where the fundamentals were for many years around the COVID era, but also as well the ensuing kind of, if I'm going to start a development, what is that going to cost me, and is it the right asset class to build? Within Australia, we've come down from our sort of 20-year growth of new rooms, and also as well, with more rooms, you need more new rooms to be planned to come to have the supply growth be a higher percentage number. So you can then see, even though we might be building a proportion of rooms, it over time starts to come down in terms of its impact in terms of growth, because it's just a simply larger denominator that you now have. And I expect that number to continue to stay where it is and retreat further. Now, I mentioned before as to why we're seeing the occupancy and average rate be able to grow as strongly as it has, and that's simply because for many years we were growing at sort of mid-1s to 2% growth in supply across the country, and now we've done less than 1% over the last 2 years, which means that if demand continues to grow, it's much easier for that demand to exceed supply growth, and therefore you get occupancy growth, And with that occupancy growth, operators get more encouraged by what their overall demand's going to look like, and therefore are then more optimistic about how they're going to price their property and achieve higher average rates. And ultimately, if you take a look at where we were in 2019 to where we are now, we built a lot more rooms. Demand is now, demand you can see is well up on what we were doing in 2019. And because we've added all those rooms, occupancy is now starting to creep above where it was in 2019. Now there's a couple of months there that really stand out, and there's particular sort of one-off drivers that we get every few years, and I'll talk a little bit more about that specifically for Adelaide in a moment. But you can see that they were starting to get back to where occupancy was in 2019, and there's very little reference that we'll all make about 2019, but it is still a reference point that we do need to consider relative to where things have been and how they've progressed over the last 5 or 6 years. Now, I mentioned that we've just had in Australia a huge development boom, and you can see this is the number of rooms that are under construction. So you can see that across the country we peaked sort of in that 2020, 2021 period where a lot of projects were already well underway and progressing through, and then obviously then projects didn't commence because they didn't know that they could commence, price escalation, etc. You didn't start unless you're really underway. But then as the fundamentals improved, if you had a site that was pretty much ready to go, everything still made sense. Yes, you had to reprice the cost of it, but you still then proceeded with that particular construction. Now, there's a few things that are very interesting in what the supply outlook looks like for Australia. One of them is that new hotels are much smaller today than what they were, and even the new hotels that have opened, we were opening hotels just shy of 200 rooms on average when the hotels opened in sort of 2020, 21. Now it's about 143 rooms is the average size of a hotel that's under construction today. The second thing is there's at least 1,000 rooms around the country, not any in Adelaide. There are shells of buildings completely constructed, but nothing's going on inside because the project has just kind of come up, usually part of a mixed-use environment that then is just sitting there. I don't think, who knows what's going to happen with those particular rooms, but we have to count them because they're in there. But effectively, there's 1,000 odd rooms, particularly in Brisbane and Melbourne, that are just sitting there idle. And we're starting to see more and more some of these projects that even have started are then just not progressing any further for various different reasons, but largely it's to do with financing. Nothing to do with the performance outlook. The other thing as well is that they're pretty much now Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney is where the bulk of the new rooms are coming from, and I'll speak to this in a little bit more detail. 3/4 of it's in the capital cities. And the other thing we're seeing is that the operation mode, we're not seeing many independent hotels. It's really an anomaly now to do it. But what we are seeing is that of the total inventory across Australia, so not just new hotels, but we've gone from about 7% of all rooms were franchised to 11%. Now, it's nothing compared to what it is in the US, but it is continuing to increase as a model. And largely that's because there's new players in the market who can operate as a third party, but also the fact that brands tap into distribution and how critical that is to be able to derive a return and be up to date with the market. The other thing that's really interesting is where have all the new rooms gone across Australia is that 84% of all new rooms over the last decade have all gone into the capital cities. No surprise that all these rooms were built to appeal to a growing international source market and where most of the economic activity has happened. Effectively, all that new rooms have come into the capital cities, which has revitalised a lot of the inventory that sits across it. All that being said, what we're seeing in hotel performance, and you look at obviously the absolute numbers and the averages that come through, if you look at the number of submarkets that we have across the country, and there's 50 odd that we have around Australia, the number of them that are reporting both occupancy and average rate growth continues to grow, which has been a really strong sign that this is not just some portions of the market are doing well and others are not doing so well. It's very broad-based in terms of what we've achieved overall. So there's multiple levers that hotel operators across all different asset classes, whether it's holiday parks, hostels, traditional hotels and motels, etc., more and more as an area are continuing to do well. And when you look at South Australia regions as an example, you can see there that across the sort of areas we have there, that it obviously peaked out in that sort of revenge travel period post-COVID where we were allowed to travel, but people didn't really want to go too far. That obviously came through, bit of a softening out, and effectively we're back to the same sorts of levels in terms of their running 12-month occupancy level, which is a reasonable position to be in from that. And yes, there was some ups and downs through various periods of time where stimulus was required, particularly with the algal bloom impacting, but it was marginal in terms of at a macro level across the submarket really having any material impact to that. The other thing as well is that March, April can be a little bit of a kind of, you don't really know where you're at because Easter moves around and makes various different kind of comparisons. So I don't want to show Easter compared to last year because Easter was only happening the weekend that's just gone. Last year. It also then happened to be on the back of Anzac Day and we all just took the extra few days off, and if you went to work, were you really at work? Unless you're in a hotel where you physically have to be visible, but I know plenty of people who wouldn't have been in their office. So I want to compare it against 24, which was effectively it was the end of March into April, so it's a much better comparison of separation between the periods. And you can see there that Adelaide didn't do as well, but across the regional markets, they did quite well, and despite all of the noise around the market and fuel, etc., performance was pretty good. Year to date, in terms of how the capital markets are performing, they're pretty much doing what we'd expect them to do based on what's kind of naturally happening in terms of their growth. This is deliberately meant to be a lot of squiggly lines on the page, but to just show that there isn't really anyone who's kind of moving away. The only outliers are that Parliament got returned early to do the particular laws that they wanted to put in place. Cyclone Alfred was in 2025, which obviously had to be then obviously the comp of that. And then obviously Easter shifts around. But by and large, everything is kind of trading across the capital cities as we'd expect them to do. Now, when we look at Adelaide specifically, and I'll spend a bit of time here now talking through that, is that fundamentally supply has kind of been ticking along, and it's been reducing in terms of its overall share of the market as those new hotels have completely traded. And demand's been doing incredibly well. Ever since July, it's really been running at a really strong level, much higher than what supply is, therefore you're getting the occupancy growth. And you can see there that March kind of falls off on a whim. You've got to remember as well that the Easter sort of week leading in falls into March, which has a downward impact on the last few days of March. And at the same time, even with that, March was still the highest demand we've ever seen in the Adelaide market in the history of that, by a few thousand room nights compared to last year. And you lost effectively a business trading week through that, which means you get this result. Really strong occupancy levels, really good average rate coming through, not just in the months where there was signature events, but consistently across those months, which gives you a really good backbone to be able to work from moving forward. Equally, on a day-of-week basis for the last 12 months, we're seeing occupancy growth across all 7 nights of the week and average rate growth across all 7 nights of the week. And as you would expect, average rate growth has been stronger Wednesday through Saturday because guess what? Most of the time, events happen Wednesday to Saturday. There's more discretionary spend on those days in terms of hoteliers being able to adapt their price and really move with the elasticity of demand, that you're able to get those results to come through. So again, it's speaking to that it's quite broad-based in what's coming through to date. Now, one of the really interesting things, and this is true of almost every market you look at, capital market in Australia, it is even more pronounced in markets like the US where probably inequality is even more skewed than it would be in Australia. And if people sort of understand some economics, they would have heard the K-shaped economy, which is that some people are absolutely doing really well. They're getting wealthier off the stock market. They own their own home. and then others who are kind of living paycheck to paycheck are getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. We haven't got that as much in Australia across it because we've seen largely a lot of growth across all the different hotel classes, and I think our travelling behaviour is a little bit different than that. But what is true is that in all markets, and Adelaide here is an example of that, is that the differential for luxury and upper upscale hotels to upscale and upper mid-scale hotels in terms of their average rate achieved has gone from saying that in end of 2015, the difference was $27. Fast forward another 5 years to just before we get to COVID, it's $28, hasn't moved at all. Then you fast forward through the years of COVID to today, it's effectively, just shy of doubling. Not quite there, but let's call it double. What does that say? I mean, you can interpret different things from all of that, but when you then throw in this, that supply has grown 50% for luxury and upper upscale hotels in the last 5 years, and that upscale and upper mid-scale has actually had fewer rooms in that, so some have upgraded because they've changed brands, and then others have kind of left the market, and the new ones have come in, which is a large degree to what you might be thinking. You then get the ability to be able to extend that gap. And I think that has some thoughts for if you're a luxury and upper upscale hotel, how do you think about that and continuing to push? But also if you're in the mid-tier, how do you look at that as to how do you make sure that you're catching that average rate growth that's there and has been there? One of the things that's been a really consistent theme and a good theme for Adelaide, and Martin, you'll enjoy this slide here, is that group occupancy has been a very consistent theme in producing around 10% of the market, 10% of the occupancy pretty much consistently for a long period of time. And that provides a baseline, obviously, to build from. Now, this is just what you guys are categorising as group business that's coming through, but we all know that a lot of people book different ways, and there's probably even more than that that's actually in the mix of what would be group. They're just booking it independently for being in a group environment to that. But again, a very kind of good baseline to work from. Now, within the Adelaide market, we kind of separate it to the Adelaide CBD, so the terraces and North Adelaide is Adelaide Centre, and then the rest, the greater Adelaide kind of region, north and south is included here. And what you can see is that the blue line, which is Adelaide surrounding, has had a little bit of a drop off in its overall occupancy level on the basis that we've added about 12% of new supply. So properties have gone in to like Mawson Lakes, Glenelg, etc. Over the last couple of years, which has had an impact in terms of their overall occupancy level that they've achieved. Meanwhile, Adelaide Centre has kind of absorbed those rooms predating this period, and therefore it's been able to accelerate its occupancy over that time. Then when you look at average rate, even though those new rooms have been added into the Adelaide surrounding, because they're brand new, they're largely probably at a higher class, and they're wanting to achieve a certain level because their quality is much stronger than what the existing stock would be there. The average rate has been able to continue to improve. Meanwhile, for the centre of the city, yes, it's absorbed all of that new supply, and occupancies progressively start to come up, but average rate is only now just getting back to where it was a couple of years earlier. And to demonstrate that a little bit further, this is the rolling Adelaide Centre average rate on a 12-month basis. And you can see that effectively the 12-month average has only got back to where it was in November 23 because of those new supply of rooms has had an impact to that. Now, Adelaide's going to go through a bit of its last cycle of a mini surge of new rooms. There's about 959 rooms that'll get added at the end of this year and early into next year. Most of that is in the CBD, but there are particularly one of the new Hurley property, the Panorama there, coming into the market. So knowing what I've just shown you, that's obviously going to have an impact in terms of what's going to come through for the market. So we've added about 1,900 rooms between 2020 and now, and that's just in the luxury to upper mid-scale classes. So I wanted to have a look at, well, how have those new hotels traded relative to those who have existed prior to that? Not surprising, the occupancy, new hotels are pretty much trading at levels the same as the incumbent hotels who've been around for a lot longer. However, they're trading essentially at a $30 average rate premium to what the existing stock is. And I've deliberately tried to look at just the top 4 classes here to try and knock out some of the really old stock that's sitting in it, and obviously no lower class stock has really come into the market. But you can see that they're effectively doing much better than existing stock. Now this is just looking at them in aggregate. There's obviously going to be pluses and minuses to that, but it is new stock does accretively help overall the market conditions to that, and they're able to trade quite quickly into that. Now, we can't not talk about events and what impact they have had and what future ones are going to have. So I wanted to have a look at obviously the most recent one. So Gather Round continued to do quite well, even with kind of all of the news around fuel and people being able to travel across the border, etc. Demand was slightly down overall for it, but in terms of overall revenue that was delivered to the state, increased, and largely that was all average rate going up about 7 points compared to the prior year. Now, I did want to have a look at what was the booking pace of Gather Round to look at a few things. So there was 2 things that really stood out for me. One was compared to 2000, so this tracks essentially the 52-week lead-in of when someone books and how much occupancy is booked into the Adelaide market. So you can see here that compared to the lighter teal line, booking pace was much slower for longer than it was in 2025. Now, I don't know why there is that much of a difference, because when I look at, this is when the date was announced for 2026, it was about 30 weeks out, and you saw there was a first initial spike of that. So maybe there's a little bit more confidence there that kind of pushed through, but I don't know why, in terms of the event announcement side of stuff, I don't think there's too much difference year over year to that. In terms of the match fixture announced, how do you put this? Depends on what team you follow or just whether you like football or not. I mean, there weren't a lot of great matchups that were really in this year's schedule, so that was probably an improvement that could be there. But again, you saw once the matches were fixed and people knew what they definitely wanted to go see versus what they might be interested in going and seeing, there was then another spike that came through. So I think in terms of how the announcements are made and the mapping of that does have some degree of kind of what bookings were made. And then it's a much smaller, but you can see it just highlighting there as well, is that 3 weeks out, so 2 weeks post the attacks and then obviously the talk around fuel, there is a downturn in the overall occupancy that was held on the books, and then that has bounced up. And you didn't see the same spike as much at the end as you did the prior year, which probably tells you there was some impact, minimal, but there was some impact in terms of the impact of all of that stuff that impacted Gather Round specifically for it. Now, what has Gather Round done over the last few years? Well, between the inaugural edition in 2023 and then 24, 25 and 26, you can see the year-over-year growth that's been achieved is that effectively occupancy is now trading at a similar level to what it was in 24, but average rate continues to grow. And if you look at it since its inception, essentially in a month of April, which is a pretty ordinary month for Adelaide predating Gather Round and Live, it's added 2 percentage points in occupancy and $115 in rate since its very first year for that. So again, and that's not even including if you then take the whole event out and its actual overall impact to April as a month. I haven't shown that here, but you can imagine that it's incredibly strong. So it continues to bolster the month, but also continue to grow year over year. Now, the next question that a lot of people ask and you see in the media is, it's becoming a bit of a kind of corporate, not for the man and the woman kind of vibe that comes through. So I was like, what event do you want to compare it to that is the kind of, upper echelon, I've got to be seen at event, et cetera, et cetera. So here's Formula One as a comparison. Now, you can interpret this as to whether there's more average rate growth achievable, or have we tapped out or not. That's not my place to kind of decide what that is. The market will, and you will individually. But just for some perspective, Adelaide has about 11,500 rooms. Melbourne has 45,500, so it's essentially four and a bit times more than us. Their occupancy over the 4-day period is higher than what Gather Round achieves. And also their average rate is $91 higher to that. So does that tell you that there's more room to grow or not? Again, as I said, that's up to you as to how you want to interpret that. The other thing as well, now starting to fast forward a little bit further as well, is that I showed you all of Australia, capital cities, in terms of their forward occupancy. Now, I showed you up to the end of 2025. This is Adelaide, looking at the last 2 years, plus this year in terms of the next 28 days occupancy every single week, and then move forward another week, etc. You can see that the dark teal line is trending beneath the two other dotted lines and the light teal one there of the 2 prior years in terms of its performance. Now, April is always a funny month, and effectively all we've done is just got to where our trend line is for May, June, July, I think, sooner than we ordinarily have. Because when you think about that, 2025 had later Easter, 2024 had Live still hanging in there because it was still in April before it moved to Feb last year. We effectively just got to that dotted line much sooner. So probably, I'm imagining there is a little degree of nervousness that sits in what people are holding in terms of their short-term occupancy, because they would be looking at something similar to this, knowing that, okay, I've got to try and work through that. And we all know in Adelaide that the next 3 months is kind of where you hold on and then kind of come back from it. So it is something that probably is on the negative side of something to watch for. Now, the other thing as well is that there's lots of good events, but there's also going to be a changing event profile for that. So I wanted to look at, based on last week's, probably 2 weeks now, isn't it? Monthly view of what occupancy is on the book. You can see that June, July, and November and December are trading below in terms of the occupancy on the books relative to 2025. June's always the quietest month. It's always the hardest month. That will be it. July is the next one I want to look at. Obviously, British and Irish Lions toured. They're not coming back. Got to wait 12 years for that. You can see there that July is effectively trading as you would expect July to be, with the exception of that particular 3 or 4 day period where there was a lot of occupancy on the books, and we obviously don't have it now. So July is obviously just going to rip that out, and I'll talk about what financial impact that actually will have to the month. But otherwise, July is trading as we'd expect it to be at this point in time for July into the future. The other thing as well is that we might have had COP, which would have been a very interesting concept in the world we now live in, particularly with recent events. But I do want to put a caution on, yes, November was kind of holding back all this occupancy on the expectation that we might have COP here in November. That's obviously not happening. And the ability to be able to get that occupancy back is coming true, and I'll talk to that in a sec. But I do just want to say November is the strongest month. Essentially, since 2019, it's always done, other than the exception of the 2 kind of COVID years there, it's essentially done plus 80%. So there is a mix of demand that's coming through. It's an incredibly strong month to come through. And if you have a look at average rate, it is also the strongest average rate month, which then backs up that demand is pretty healthy, more or less over the top. So therefore, you should have a degree of confidence that even though COP's not happening, there is demand that probably will be there and want to be able to do it, because it is the last full month on the business calendar at the very least for that. Equally, when you look at the forward occupancy on the books for November at this point in time, the end of the month is obviously supercars, but predating that, there is some gap that probably is exposed because we haven't got that. So yes, it is a little bit down on where it is on normal pace. And then obviously it's up to each of you in your individual ways to be able to then try and attract the demand, but have a degree of confidence still that November is always a strong month that trades through. I mentioned before about we have to kind of knock out some of the key events. So just as a kind of give you part of the way in terms of working that for you individually is if you look at the British and Irish Lions Tour, its premium over the rest of the month delivered you about 26% increase in occupancy to what you'd ordinarily expect and a 92% average rate gain to what you ordinarily would expect. So obviously there's quite a significant margin of knocking out 3 or 4 days of revenue back to that, which is obviously going to show up in the overall month for that. And as much as we love our Tasman neighbours, they're not going to do what India did and certainly not going to do what the English can do in terms of its impact in terms of December. It's absolutely perfect week now in terms of where it's now locked into the calendar being that pre-Christmas test, which is unbelievable, but it's not going to obviously do the same volume to that. And Bessa, I'm surprised you didn't say it, that there was no kind of POM inflation or English inflation reference in that, because I think a lot of the inflation that does show up there is probably underestimated how much British pounds were spent in our country converted into Aussie dollars in terms of that short-term inflation spike that's coming through. Because certainly as there is...
My microphone's not on, but certainly you did see quite strong spending for the second half of last year in terms of consumer spending. But that, the data does show that some of that momentum has been lost.
Yeah.
The early part of 2026. So the Lions Tour did add to spending, but I guess still overall, it's still not the largest component.
Yeah.
I guess one thing is that when the British do come to Australia for a test match, they do tend to stay for up to a month wherever they are in Australia, which is quite high relative to some other visitors from other parts of the world.
Yeah, yeah. So I measure it in that. If we've got the brewers in the room, they can probably answer how much extra was consumed and then work backwards from that rather than the hoteliers. But obviously, we've still got events, but they're not going to be materialising the same way. So obviously that needs to be factored into how you're thinking about that. So in summary there, I'm not going to read out every particular kind of notation there, but also as well, I will throw up on the screen as well. If you want to take a picture of that QR code, it'll have a link. Within that link, there will be, if you scroll to the bottom of my business card, you'll be able to download a PDF of today's presentation. And then if you don't get it, I'll give it to Ben and he'll have it, as Andrew mentioned earlier. It will be in an information pack. But yeah, I think overall, I would summarise to say that, Adelaide's had an extremely good run of it. There is some short-term impact that we do need to factor in terms of what impact the supply will have in the short term. But you can see there that over time, demand and the fact that there was a want to put investment into the market, whether it's related to events or the infrastructure program, which requires a lot more workers and probably people to come and visit to supervise different things or check in on things, does mean that over the medium term, we should expect to see that trading performance continues to come through at the numbers we have seen. It might just have a little bit of a short-term impact to that, and ultimately it's up to how the industry wants to interpret that and react to it that ultimately will drive the outcomes. So thank you very much for the opportunity again, as always. Thanks, mate.
Well done, as always.
So thank you everyone for coming today. I know it's hard to squeeze these things in. Thank you very much as well to the Minister, particularly hard for you to squeeze things in. So thank you very much for your time today. Our earlier interactions with you, of course, were with you as the Minister for Autism. But I want to take you back further than that. So we want to talk about the Minister, Emily, that grew up, I think, in regional South Australia, and how that shaped your life. I'm a country girl as well, so...
Excellent. Thanks, Anna. And I've had the great pleasure of knowing you for quite some time, which I've really appreciated, always your honest feedback. But I guess when I started as the new minister, I was going through my briefings, as you always do. You get these lovely piles of documents to read through, and something really stood out to me from SATC in regards to what our values were, was as a state we're trying to promote was the simple pleasures. And I thought that really does sum up my childhood. I grew up on a farm between Maitland and Ardrossan, and life was about simple pleasures. It was really about riding our bikes around for hours on end and coming back at night time, and only because we were hungry. But we would spend hours and hours building cubby houses in the scrub. But we also grew up in a very busy household. We are part of a farming family, but also an engineering family. We have an engineering business at Pine Point. I'm not sure if no one really goes to Pine Point. They drive straight through and keep going. But if you look to the left when you're driving through towards the bottom end, you'll see Born Engineers, and that's our family business that we've had now for over 70 years. It's been run as an engineering business. But there's an old wives' tale that we were always told that my great-grandfather was the first registered blacksmith in South Australia, and he started up this business. So I've seen, I guess, what the cost of having a small business is on family life. Dad was never home. We were all absolutely required to play our part in between having fun, and saw that, the struggles, the highs and the lows, but also that incredible thing of when you get to deliver something that your dad has made. As a family, we would drive all over the country delivering his machinery. Somehow we survived in these road trips, which I have to say were not very passing any road rules that you would get through today. We would travel in the semi-truck, and there would be 7 of us in there, 5 kids. Mum and Dad driving us, and we had the caravan on the back of the truck in between the machinery, and that was our family holidays. But getting to the destination and delivering that machinery to help another family so they could have better farming practices is something I always felt very proud of. But I could also see how hard it was to get to that point to make sure we could keep making that machinery as well. So, I guess I saw the benefits of small family businesses, but also having to work hard to make sure that we could keep giving back and being a part of that community as well.
You might not have been able to make those disclosures if you were still the Minister for Transport.
No, it never went down very well when I made those
road rules.
stories.
So that probably is a good segue into the next question, which is, you had a farming background and an engineering background. So what led you into government and politics?
Yeah, so I guess I've always liked helping people, and I went to Adelaide like most country kids, and I studied and did a lot of media study, and I really loved it. I loved telling people stories, capturing people's stories, but I did miss being in the regions, and I had an opportunity to go back and work at the York Peninsula Country Times, which is a local paper on Yorks, and I moved back for 3 years to work at the paper, and I absolutely loved it, and I fell in love with sharing people's challenges, but also when doing so, the benefits that can come from that. And it's something, it's I guess an example of today as well, when you bring complete strangers together, it's very, very powerful because they're coming together for a sole purpose of a benefit that can help more people in their community. And they're bound together by that sole purpose for no other reason, because they're usually strangers. And being able to achieve those things for the newspaper made me fall more in love with how can I advocate and help others. And like most country kids, we get married, and I ended up in Adelaide, and I worked at the Stock Journal for a short period of time. But then also decided there was an opportunity for me in 2006 to work as a staffer in the upper house, and that's how I ended up there. But so it really came about from working at the country newspaper, where I could help a lot of people. We helped save a little local hospital and helped many other community sporting events, and everyone sort of advocate to stay viable as well.
So in terms of your initial thoughts, in terms of the portfolios that you have now I'm sure you were rapt when you found that you had us as an industry, but what's your thoughts about hospitality, the hotel industry, and in particular accommodation and tourism? What's your initial thoughts?
Well, I was a bit nervous when I came in today and saw data on the screen. I was like, that's never a good thing when you're a government minister. But I guess it shows a really powerful story at the moment that we are doing well. But I guess also I am a bit concerned the data is going down when I started in this role. But
The only way's up then.
I know, that's right. Their only way is up now. So I think there is an incredible opportunity in South Australia. And I do feel like, as I said earlier, my portfolio mix of tourism, environment, water and climate are really the combination of my childhood and also represent and tell the story of South Australia so well. They are the simple pleasures of tourism can sell our state. There is a really powerful platform. We have seen that time and time again. Tourism is fundamental in selling our state. We see that with our major events. We see that with so many other things as well, but also environment has to be healthy for tourism to thrive. And we've seen that with the algal bloom. So I think there's a really incredible opportunity to come about with getting people out to see South Australia, into the outback, into the hills, to the coast, because those simple things that we have are our natural wonders. And when you go there, it's hard to forget it. But we just have to have the opportunity to get people here to experience it. And that's where our major events come into play. And the data tells that story. When they do come here, they do want to come back. We have a very powerful story to tell as a state. But how do we get people to stay longer? How do we get them to venture into the more regional areas of our state so that they can also experience what so many of us have in this room, those simple pleasures of being able to be out in our beautiful regional areas, but also want to go back.
So in terms of, there were a lot of changes to ministerial portfolios after the election, and yours wasn't the only one to change, and there were some additions as well. So we now have a Minister for Adelaide, and that's Lucy Hood. Do you have any thoughts about how you and your portfolio would work together with her for the benefit of tourism and accommodation?
Yeah, Lucy and I are very good friends. I was her campaign manager when she came into government, and I think it's a really good opportunity. Nick Champion used to be the Minister for Adelaide. I live in the city. I love the city. I feel like it is, on weekends, you know everyone around you, you know all the cafes. It is really about being a part of a community when you live in the city. And there's a really good opportunity for us, and I think our policy agenda tells that story. We've said that we want to underwrite development and change in the city. We want more people living there. We want more people to be a part of this story and part of this vibrancy, because a busy city is a safe city. And I think Lucy, with her local knowledge of being the local member, is the best person also to be advocating for this. We know that the West Terrace side of the city could absolutely benefit from more development and change. And as a government, we've worked with the Adelaide Airport to achieve that. Previously, the flight paths were a factor in holding us back because of the heights of the buildings. We've been able to work closely with the Adelaide Airport to make sure that we can get the developments in the right locations and more of them, but also put a guarantee in place for underwriting as a government of a $500 million package to do so. So I think there's an opportunity with us to do that, is to bring diversity into the market in the CBD. So making sure that we have the nighttime and daytime people living in our city, so having the young, the old and everyone in between. We can do that by nominating what cohort should be living where and making sure that diversity is in our housing market. I think that particularly also the other opportunity of having the downsizer package, of saying that we will also support you as a government if you are downsizing, if you're over in your retirement, so you can go and live in a smaller property as well, to release more market into for families, for bungalows and that type in the metropolitan areas. But in the city, potentially also attracting older people into the city as well. So it's really about having young families, people working in retail, and people that may be wanting to downsize now living in the city, which hopefully will mean for everyone here is having more people visit our restaurants, but also the accommodation that comes with it. So having development that go in, but also having the government that will back you to make those changes.
Last question from me. at least. Possibly the hardest one. So you got 4 years now. What's your dream for tourism and accommodation in this state over the next 4 years? And where, by the end of this term of government, would you like to see tourism for this state?
Yeah, I guess there was a few things. I'm only a few weeks in, so I'm a big believer in sitting down and working with the industry to figure out where do we have growth opportunities. From the few weeks that I've been in this role, I've been to the Flinders Ranges for a couple of days to see how things are going there. I've been to the Riverland, to York Peninsula, going to KI next week, because we want to just make sure that we can see how things are tracking, what is working and what's available. Something resonated with me in regards to opportunities, I guess, is tourism and the environment have a really important role to play. We can make sure that if we have a healthy environment, we can have a healthy tourism industry, and how do we get people into our regions more? But during Gather Round, it was mentioned quite a number of times in the fact that a third of people now living in Australia had never seen football before because they've come, either new residents and never really experienced some of our major events. So there's an opportunity to, I guess, market us to other countries as well. So where is the AFL now needing to promote itself to make sure that that is seen as a sport that people want to participate in? How are we making the most of the direct routes that we have into the US? How are we making the opportunities available to us to get our major events like the MotoGP and promoting that to get people here? So we see, as they've seen in Melbourne, people are more willing to pay for higher rates when they go to an event they see as a higher standard. The MotoGP is just that. So how are we attracting people from other countries to come here, enjoy that event, stay longer and experience South Australia so that they then return for another holiday. So I guess for me it's about figuring out what we have first, and to do that I want to sit down and learn from you. Obviously we have challenges at the moment with fuel, and not only prices but the understanding and guarantee that fuel will be there for the trip to get to your destination but also to get home. I've been trying to work as hard as we can in the first few weeks to sit down with the SATC and make ourselves available to listen. We've been able to get the REA app up and running because of the feedback from people like the AHA, your community as well, to say that there needs to be certainty to travel and to get home again. We're having a few... a task force group that's being established just for the tourism sector that starts tomorrow, so that we can again start feeding in the feedback from the sector to make sure that we can get people where they need to be, but also the information out to people. So also working really closely with the Federal Minister for Tourism, Don Farrell, and also he's the Minister for Trade, which is very handy.
Excellent. Thank you, Emily. Now, where's Ben? Right where there's a great big light. So I can hear you, but I can't see you. Do we have time for a few questions from the floor? If
One
the
or two
minister's
questions would be
prepared.
great.
Okay.
Let's go. Any questions from the floor for the Minister or Anna?
And wave or shout if there is, because it's really hard to see up here because of the light.
Introduce yourself when you ask the question, please.
Afternoon, Minister. Sarah Goldfinch from the Adelaide Convention Centre. Lovely to meet you. I guess you touched on earlier, Bessa, in your message around employment and employment is the lowest it has been. One of the challenges in tourism is attracting and keeping our skilled workforce. What are your thoughts on attracting and keeping our skilled workers?
I guess in lots of sectors we have, this is a challenge across the board. And when I went to the Wilpena Pound, this is something that came up as their number one issue, is we have a seasonal workforce and we're reliant on making sure that we can get people here but retain them and having people move from destination to destination. I'm all ears to hear what your thoughts are in this. Obviously, I've just come from infrastructure and transport, where we have been able to invest a lot in tech colleges and trade schools to make sure that we are training up that workforce. But I also think by the fact that we have these major events, all of a sudden South Australia has gone from not really having many events to in the last 4 years having the events that people want to go to, having MotoGP, Gather Round, Live Golf. These are events that then make it exciting for people to want to get into hospitality, which I think provides us an opportunity. How do we train and retain people in this sector? And I can only learn that from you, who have the experience in this area, but also can bring in the experience I've brought from my other portfolios previously, where, yes, you need the mentors, as we've seen in other areas, but you also need the facilities that help provide that training. I know TAFE is providing free TAFE courses in areas. I'll have to actually check if hospitality, where is that in that scheme? But I completely agree. We saw on the data that was provided that this is a sector that is growing. It is an employment opportunity. It's more than often not the first job that someone will be in hospitality. But we also see that so many stay. And it's not just your first job, it's your lifetime job. So how do we make sure that more people are hearing that story, because it's a career path, not just a first job?
I think that would be music to a lot of people's ears in this room, the last comment that you made. We want to shift things from it being the job that you have before you have a job. This can be your first job and your last job in this industry. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much, Emily.
That was an easy question time.
It might be the easiest one that you have. Thank you very much for your time today. I know you're incredibly busy, so if you can just join with me in thanking the Minister for her time today. We're transitioning now to the workshops, but I'll let you. You want to talk about that?
I do.
Okay.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you, Minister. Look, absolutely fantastic fireside chat. Thank you, everyone, for that. As I mentioned before the break, we had some feedback that a larger level of interaction from the last session would be appreciated. So we are going to go into what we're calling... Ben's phone. No. This was my word of warning. I've been to many of these myself. You hear interactive session, you see tabletop discussion, you might think about your phone. Let's do ourselves a favour and let's engage with each other for the next 20 minutes or half an hour, if that's okay. Very, very important that we do that, clearly. But also, again, a reminder, this session's being recorded. So in a way, we're kind of a subculture of every other hotelier and hotel out there. It's being recorded. We're going to sort of talk back afterwards as well. So it's a way to share what's going on and what you discover around the option topics. So, tabletop discussion. There's 5 topics that I've circulated, 1 per table. I think there's 10 or 11 tables, so there's more than one topics are at more than one table, which is what I'm trying to say. We're going to give you about 20 minutes, so we're really looking for you to interact with each other. So you should have, I feel like a kind of a bingo dealer. You should have an envelope that looks just like an envelope, funnily enough. There's a little number in the corner. I think most of us know what an envelope looks like, but anyway, it should be one on your table. If you can grab that, have a quick look. We've got butcher's paper and markers for the creative amongst you. So what we're looking for, because output is important, as we all know, in relation to your option topic, we're looking for one key, I've kept the bar low, guys, one key insight. There's 5 or 6 of you at the table. In relation to the option topic, one key insight to share, one surprising observation, I'm not even quite sure what that means, but I'm sure you'll work it out, and one opportunity or action. Okay, so as I said, we've got 5 topics. I think it's roughly, it's two tables per topic. So at the end of 20 odd minutes, which will be about 4:30, we're going to come back and I'm going to call out a table person. Did I forget a table? No? Okay, good. We're going to call out and we're going to have a bit of a chat about it. But we want you to share your one key insight, one surprising observation, and one opportunity or action based on the option topic of your table. Is that clear? Everyone nodding? Yep, good. All right, let's go. Thanks. Where's our envelope? Look, I had the right level of expectation. There you go. Number 1.
Oh, we should be doing one.
Yeah, can do one. Why not?
Do you want us to move around?
We still have Bessa and Matthew here, so I'll actually have them move around the tables. If there's some sort of query, question, or you think there might be a value add from Matthew or Bessa, please feel free to raise your hand. Righto, everyone. Just another 5 or 10 more minutes. A reminder, output is important. One key insight, one surprising observation, one opportunity or action. Thank you. Hello. Hello. Okay, if I can have your attention back, please. I won't stand on the stage. I was inspired by Bessa and Matt just kind of roving around like this, so we're gonna do it this way. So, lots of conversation out there, which was very, very nice to hear. I was just talking to Matthew then, and it's a fantastic mix in the room in that there's a lot of familiar faces to the point where Matthew and I thought it was some sort of a reunion function or an alumni dinner. But there are quite a few new people as well, which is great. And as Andrew said in his introduction, some of our significant and complementary tourism businesses. So, without further ado, let's hear back. We had outputs, which I was very excited about. I'm not going to go with topic number 1 first. I'm going to go with number 3. Who had option topic number 3, please? Sorry, I turned away. Yes, please. Yeah. Okay, so let's start over here. And we're looking for just sort of 5 minutes total. So we'll start with one table and then we'll come over to the other table that had the same option topic to then massively value add what they say. All right, let's go.
Great. So to start things off, we actually didn't write the answers to any of these insights, which is fantastic. So, but I do have the answers. So topic 3, event and tourism, what actually moves the needle? Our one key insight that we agreed on was creating or having events that actually generates compression within the market. Separating what actually drives occupancy and what is just noise. So a key example of that, which is hopefully going to drive some great occupancy, I'm sure we're all aware of it, is MotoGP next year in November. That big international headline is not only just going to bring in a big domestic demand, but also international demand from feeder markets, say in Southeast Asia, where Adelaide usually lacks on that international demand. Where you compare it to another event, say, I don't know, Oz Asia, which is a fantastic event, but it doesn't necessarily drive that international exposure. So that was, I believe that was our one key insight, right? Yes? Okay, good. Number 2, surprising observation. We had a couple points on this. I think one of the points, again, was although Adelaide has a lot of events, it doesn't necessarily, linked to our first point, it doesn't necessarily create compression in the market. It's quite localized to certain areas of the region within the city. So a good example that the table came up with was Fringe. So the east side of the city heavily benefits off the Fringe Festival, where here at Intercontinental Adelaide, a 5-minute walk away from that location, we don't really see that move the needle, which was, I mean, we're all pretty aware of it, but that was what we landed for, a surprising observation. And one opportunity that's, or action. Again, linking to point 1, really driving not only just big international acts. So say Metallica was a fantastic example last year that brought in huge demand, huge compression. We need more of that, not just during the peak season, say November, December, March, February. We need that during winter. So, you know, your winter months that we're kind of heading into now, we need those big acts coming in. And then Techie made the great point of, well, Oval is actually closed. Like, you can't have concerts in the winter. So opening up a second stadium would be a fantastic opportunity or action. Yes, the action, not opportunity.
That was a to-do list item, was it?
That's it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being brave and commenting on that forward. We appreciate that. Our second table that had the same topic, please. Thanks, Lucy. Oh, wait. Okay, we're going to be really quick with that table.
Well, we can be quick because ours are relatively similar. That sounded like a very good discussion over there. We went with a key insight. We said the international and high-profile events that attract. We went down the path of influencers and sort of are to be seen at. Events seem to drive revenue and occupancy plus a higher spend. And we use the same example, actually, F1 for Melbourne, MotoGP that's coming here. We think that's a fantastic initiative. So that was our key insight to what we think we need to keep attracting. The surprising insight that we came up with was Adelaide does already probably punch above its weight, at least recently, given the data that we saw there today. And we just needed, our action was we need to keep and replace those events to keep the momentum all year round. So that was another theme, that it's got to be spread relatively evenly, I should say. The other opportunity in action, we went down the path actually of this. We had Minister Burke's advisor with us, so we went down the path of world-leading high-speed electric trains to the regions. We went from McLaren Vale, Barossa, the Bend, Mount Barker. Small ask, and then our very big idea. This came from Mo and I having a chat about wine and food. So we thought a July midwinter festival of wine and food to sort of roll with the Dart Mofo and Tassie. Something like that would be a great addition to the calendar if we could attract it.
All creative.
That was
fantastic.
all creative.
Thank you. This is obviously an important topic. It got 3 tables worth, so.
Well, don't they say that you have to hear something 3 times before it actually,
Might be more than 3, I think.
might be more. So we didn't cheat. We weren't listening to you guys, but we were incredibly similar to you guys. So I'm probably going to get these in the wrong order. But surprising observation was, we looked at Gather Round, and the fact that this year we probably had what you would think would have been the worst weather for it compared to the other years that were really quite sunny and stuff. And it was cold and it was rainy and stuff, and people loved it. So it was actually really, really good, because I think people embraced the weather as saying, well, this kind of weather goes with the footy because footy is a winter thing. So we then transposed that across to it being an opportunity and saying, well, maybe we should not be so Games of Thrones about winter and not be scared of winter coming, but say we should embrace this opportunity. Not actually everybody loves the warm weather and wants to go to Queensland. There are people that actually really like the colder weather and winter, and we need to not be afraid of that and look for opportunities that actually suit winter to get a more even spread across the year. Key insights, we had a few of them. So we talked about international events and kind of going, go hard or go home, right? So we should be looking at big global events. With that comes direct flights and the importance of them. We talked about events that were unique to here. So if you were going to see something, whether it be an international event or something from somewhere, anywhere really, if you could just have it here in this state, then that was the thing that would drive people here, because they didn't have the opportunity to see it anywhere else or to attend it anywhere else. But also, if the event could be recurring for a number of years, then that gives people great confidence in the industry moving forward to invest in that kind of thing. We did talk about not just direct flights, but transport to the regions as well. The comment was made, if you haven't got a car to drive to the regions, then you're probably not getting to the regions. It's too hard. And we talked about a thing called the Taylor Swift effect, which again is that you've got to have something that's so unique, so significant, international, that just draws everybody in. So, and I think that's it. So
Amazing.
We're all very similar.
Amazing, thank you. I'm delighted to have learned a new verb, which is Games of Thrones. Game of Thrones, which means not to fear winter, apparently. Like, don't get agitated. I love that. I'm just deciding whether I'm going to put hyphens in between or if I'm just going to run it into one big word. Yeah, fantastic. A couple of quick comments from me. So winter events, Illuminate, when it launched immediately after COVID, had like a whole regional program to it and everything, which I thought was really cool, and it's sort of changed a bit over the years. And then Tasting Australia, again, throwing absolutely no disrespect to people that do that. What about Tasting South Australia and move that to the winter? Make it hyper-local, break it apart, have another look at it. I'm just going to start throwing things around because someone gave me a microphone. Right, next topic. Let's go with number 5. Oh, sorry, Matthew.
Can I just add, and we probably take it for granted now, but for many of you who've been in the market for a long time, if we didn't have the Adelaide Oval, winter was like, 50% at best. So, and you look at what $550 million gets you, and what's Tasmania going to spend $1.5 billion before they even start on anything? So I think it's not a new idea, but also, what we have, you still have leverage out of how you get that through the rest of the year in terms of being able to join a Collingwood team who come over here and tie it to something else as well.
Yeah, weekends, exactly. Okay, number 5. Who had option to... Oh, sorry, hold on.
I'm not from Adelaide, I'm from Sydney, but I do come to Adelaide a lot. And just something to think about, I know in Sydney there's a bit of a push to put a roof on the Olympic Stadium because a lot of the artists that come out internationally, they can't get insurance for extra shows sometimes because or the insurance is too expensive. So I don't know if that's being thought about here, but I did just ask the neighbour whether the Oval has the roof over the top. But I know that's something that Sydney's looking at pushing. And maybe that's an opportunity here too.
Thank you. Topic 5. Who had number 5? Oh, I've got Michael. Was there another one? It should be in the middle there somewhere. Okay. Did you have 4 or 5? Okay. All right. Let's start with Michael. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Our group spoke about guests are looking for unique experiences, particularly those that proactively embrace sustainability in the sense of destination and the local community around it. The surprising observation that came out of that was around the connection or the desire for connection to people, and what else do we talk about in that sense? Yeah, it's as being a bit of a separate offer to where everything else is AI or data driven. It's a bit more natural. And then the opportunity or action around, what was that? Yeah, sorry, you're right. So with the uniqueness, it's the sense of place and the local community itself. So it being the sustainability element of it. And then with the extension of engaging in the storytelling, it's the collaborative and community engagement, the cross-promotion, and particularly connection to things like art, heritage, and food and beverage in delivering the same. Did I miss anything there?
Thank you, Michael. Second table, top-ups and value adds, please.
Hi, everyone. We discussed, and great point about sustainability, but we really focused on guest expectations sitting around tech, IT, data, and real-time feedback. Well, overarchingly, guests will want what they want. For us, in our mind, the information at people's hands is vital to them, and what it does in our industry, it puts pressure on us, basically because guests will be more critical because they've got other guest feedback, they've got information to hand a lot quicker and more accessible with AI and other tech. So we found that was crucial for guests. Where hotels are still behind, of course, we spoke of staffing, skills, which came up earlier, but also tech updates. As we spoke about, as soon as something comes to light in technology, everyone wants to jump on board and be at the forefront of that. So very important to stay ahead. And in line with that, expectation or experience upgrades for us sit around that same tech area. So seamless and efficient sign-in capabilities, Some hotels have kiosks, but going past that to check in seamlessly on your phone and having that direct route. And obviously different guests want different things. So you'll have a leisure guest compared to a corporate guest. Corporates want to come in quick, they're in and out. Leisure may want to have that interaction a bit more, but having that capability and ability to have that will put the hotel in good stead. Thank you.
Thank you. Question without notice probably for this table. Do you think hotels are keeping up with how guest expectations are changing? No? Head shake from you, Lou. Anything you want to add? Just no?
No, I don't. I think it's definitely a no. I think it's like with any technology, you've got to try, and there's always something new around the corner, and we're not nimble, we're not quick, we're quite cumbersome. Whether you're a big chain or an individual property, it takes a while and a lot of investment, and I don't think that we'll ever keep up, to be honest.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, that was topic 5. Let's go to topic 2, please. The cost of living crunch. How our guests are changing. So we've just heard how their expectations are changing. What's the cost of living crunch doing? Who had topic 2?
I've just been thrown in the deep end here. So cost of living crunch, how are our guests changing? Our key insight was that the guest is extremely savvy these days. They're looking for more value and inclusions in the market. It's not just a matter of, I guess in some respects being lazy and just dropping rate. They're going out there and looking for value in different areas. The hotels that do that the best are benefiting from that. One of our surprising observations, we're kind of using the aspect of the recent events, is that so far we haven't seen significant impact. We feel like there may be a little bit of an expectation that, similar to COVID, that there would have been a sudden drop, but at the moment we're finding that there's decent base holdings in the market. The next few months don't look too bad, but the July school holidays is where we're thinking the real litmus test will be. And that's probably, I think been a bit of a surprise for all of us in the marketplace. And that kind of moved over. An opportunity that we had was, we've written in capital letters, don't panic. I think for the marketplace, it's a matter of, trying to be creative. The hospitality and tourism industry is a great industry where we can try and think about what our guests might be looking for. So it's referring back to the first few points that, if we're trying to add more value in a cost of living crunch, we can do that by being creative with the packages that we offer, the extra value we can offer in different ways to our guests to try and encourage them to still travel. And I think, there's a huge opportunity there for us in the hospitality and tourism industry to still appeal to those people who are willing to and able to travel during this difficult time. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Alex, who was the other table with option 2? Thank you, Sarah.
Hey, thanks, Lucy. Key insights from our table was spending habits, of course, have changed, but they're moving to more experiential. So, and the diversity of products in the city is causing people to still spend. They're, still ticketing at the entertainment centre. People are, coming to the basketball in droves, selling out, and they're still buying their Coke and they're packaged, from the retail shops. I think, talking to Ben, the Adelaide Oval is still having some great, ticketing numbers. So people are seeking out experiences as opposed to saving for that one big holiday. The surprise fact that we talked about was for those key special events, whether it's a graduation, whether it is gather round or event, people are spending, and they're spending $1,000 a night, and they're splurging, and potentially in that luxe market as opposed to the drive market where people are not spending. Where we saw the opportunity, as the first table said, is to add value, package up, because people want feel valued, or the value if you are spending $1,000 a night, then let's elevate the experience and make sure that we give them great value so that they will come back, and to build on those experiences into the regions and into those shoulder months. Chaihuli in the Botanical Gardens in the winter was great, for the city. How can we extend that out to the regions?
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Bessa, a question without notice for you. And again, I'm not an economist, so forgive me if I mangle the language. Andrew's just laughed then, clearly not an economist, Ben. Post-COVID, we were told that the burgeoning spend that we saw in tourism and regions was the result of sort of savings and higher household bank balances that were then redirected when people couldn't travel overseas. And I was in the regions at the time and the boom was extraordinary, and then it flowed on into Adelaide. Is there anything in the economic data that you've seen that indicates that there is now that availability of resource that people could redirect? So I'm talking about probably household debt and household savings levels.
Well, in terms of household savings, the ratio, that's actually been rising, and that's reflecting some of that caution that's coming through for consumer confidence. I guess during COVID, one of the things we need to keep in mind was there was a lot of support from the government for businesses, for consumers, and then as the cash rate was being cut to support economic activity, and that also saw an accompanying cut in the variable mortgage rate, a lot of Australians actually just kept paying off their mortgage at the higher mortgage rate. And in fact, for some financial institutions, you actually have to ring up and say, look, I want my interest rate adjusted. And if you don't, they just, it stays at that higher rate. So it meant that many Australians that had a mortgage did build up that buffer, so to speak. And so then when COVID, we saw the reopening of COVID, and also the fact that we'd been in shutdowns. South Australia was not as severe, for example, as Sydney or Melbourne. Everyone was desperate to travel. I don't think you have, it's not the same this time round. What I would say, which I didn't put in my presentation, I do think if there are 2 more rate hikes or even more than that, I think rate cuts could come sooner because it's possible if the conflict ends quickly and you've got higher rates to try and bring down inflation, then you may actually see a quicker pivot to the cutting cycle. We actually saw a pretty quick pivot from the hiking cycle to the cutting cycle. In fact, that was the shortest pivot, since inflation targeting began, including during the GFC period. So less buffers this time around, I'd say.
Perfect, thank you. Let's go to topic 1. Who had number 1? Oh, here we go. Been waiting for this.
I feel most of our comments have already been covered. It's no secret events are what's driving a lot of our demand. So I'm just going to skip to the good stuff. So trends or surprising observations for 2026. So wellness-led travel, people again changing their booking behaviours, looking again for those experiences, happy to pay more money for them. And that's definitely coming into play along with the AI. People were going to be putting into their chat functions, I'm looking for somewhere in Adelaide that's good for 2 people, that's close to XYZ, and, it's going to create that itinerary for them. So we need to make sure that we are at the forefront of that, because that's going to be guiding a lot of people's decision making moving forward. Obviously the shift in behaviour around alcohol as well, which sort of leads into that wellness piece. And then I think just from a opportunity and action, again, just get around it. Whilst it might not be our sort of preference in some of these spaces, the young people are sort of guiding that direction, and those are the people that are going to be who we need to be talking to, moving forward. So double down. Obviously events, obviously smiley face is what I put here. on here, no brainer. And then just talking to that youth market. How do we do that, especially with, I guess, the no offense guys, but the average age of people in this room. We do need to consider that as well. Anything else to add, guys? Oh, well, you know what?
Perfect. Thank you, Sam.
Anything to add?
Good. That is it. Amazing. Thank you. Who else had option one? Do we have another option one table? No? Just one. Perfect. Nailed it. Well done. Okay. Last but not least, here we go into Dreamland. If you had $1 million to invest tomorrow, what would you do? There is more information on the card. This is not like say whatever you want. This is like, would you do more marketing or training or resourcing or whatever? I think Nick Hurley's going to build some rooms. I'm not sure. Only gets us 2 rooms, I think, at that rate. Anyway, so if you had $1 million, where would you invest it in your, let's say, hospitality business, to be a little bit more specific? Thanks, Ben.
Thanks. Our first insight was 1 million doesn't actually go that far. No. So we are going to split it into 2 pools, 500K into AI, automation and robotic innovation there, and the other 500K into staff training and development. So a bit of a mix there, but I guess the biggest surprise is just the pace of change in that AI space at the moment, and trying to keep up with it. I think that's already been covered there, but the biggest opportunity is the collective investment that our industry needs to put back into our people, and that is critical because we're a people industry, and without them, it's all going downhill.
Thank you. Who else had that topic, please? Thank you.
Sorry. So we as a group also spoke about the same thing, where if you look at it previously, we would spend $1 million on marketing because we would see revenue. But the surprising observation on that is now we need staff. If without staff, like, we can't do anything. If the room is not clean, because I think Lee gave a very good point. If we had a room that we could sell for, we'll say $500, what's the point having that room left for the next day because we didn't have the staff to actually clean that room? So robots can do so much. Robots can only do so much, but they can't actually physically clean a room, is what we came up with. Previously, so the key insight would be for staff and people is what we would spend $1 million on. Train them well, keep them motivated, keep them happy. We would incorporate them with AI as well, so where they get trained using AI. And that would be the opportunity to action also, where we turn AI into an opportunity rather than considering it as a major threat, how we can use AI to our benefit. I think, that sums up what we discussed as a group.
Fantastic, thank you. Did I miss any tables? Didn't make up a number? No? Okay, good. I think we're across that. Before we do, I guess just a very quick and final wrap up. Obviously, we still have Bessa and Matthew here. Thank you both. We still have the Minister here. You've all had time to, I guess, ruminate a little on the content from earlier, but also hear from your colleagues. Again, it's being recorded for colleagues that aren't here. Are there any other final thoughts, observations, questions of our speakers that anyone would like to throw out, please? Yes. We need everyone else to hear it too, Paul.
Thanks. Hey, Matthew, just and Bessa again, thank you for your time, for your presentations. Crystal ball, what's Adelaide look like? And I've worked with you before, and that sometimes you'd be a bit negative Nancy, but tell me about Adelaide, 12, 18, 24 months. Give us what's the market look like in your, given the numbers that you're looking at?
It's nice to see one of my groomsmen running me over. I'll take the negative part first, and then I'll speak positive. The short-term hit of the new supply will have an impact on the overall market. That's inevitable that it will happen. However, as it showed in 2020 and 21 when the new hotels opened, it actually allowed Adelaide to sell itself better and also created new demand because people were more encouraged to actually stay in their own city as well a little bit. There's no surprise. I mean, if you look where the vouchers all went, they all went to the newer hotels than the established hotels. So I think it'll overall help the market having more available. And what is coming is it's got its own little niches related to it, whichever project you talk about, whether it's Little National, Crystal Brook, Treehouse, etc. And I think that'll ultimately allow us to appeal to bigger events, because the reality is we are a small market relative to the others, which is a opportunity that we've leveraged thus far in being able to say we have an event, it owns the entire city to benefit you have. There are other events out there that can do that, and not just events, just the market overall, as Adelaide diversifies itself in terms of its economic profile, means that you're going to need people like tunnel borers do not live in Adelaide, for example, but there's going to be people who need to come and service the South Road project for the next 5 to 6 years. So there's going to be additional demand drivers that weren't historically here. So yeah, overall, I think once you get past the short-term reality of supply and demand, I think the future is bright, and there's, by and large, there is a working together feeling of where it's at. I think it's probably a similar story, but you don't have any new supply. So I think it's more about how do you attract an audience. And I think probably the biggest upside I can see for regional SA is if corporate Adelaide can continue to remain strong, that the diversified mix of people travelling as, smaller, Adelaide-based companies going out to regions, in addition to a larger population, just means even if the percentage of travel stays the same, you should see an increase in demand on the basis that supply hasn't moved either. And that's not putting any of the additional infrastructure, any of the additional marketing that might go into what's there. So I would say that at worst it's where it is right now, unless there's a black swan, to end on another negative thought. But always got to have that caveat, which is out of everyone's control.
Points to Paul for lead into a question, and for being a groomsman who got run over. I love that. Other thoughts, observations, final questions for our guests, each other? Yeah, please.
So it's for Matthew again, and maybe Bessa can actually join in. So it's you think, given that there's a possibility of ceasefire or a deal which is gonna maybe happening, and you think there is a quick pickup because hotel properties have actually lost a fair bit during this crisis. So do you think there could be a different winter this year, or property should prepare for better ADR later this year? You think there's a possibility on that?
I don't think we actually know what the impact is yet. I don't think we've effectively felt any impact as of yet in a material way. So if it continues, I think there is greater risk attached to that. If it ends, then great. But if it continues, then I think the risk profile gets larger.
I guess what you can see, though, is jet fuel prices are rising. So that will have an impact if the conflict continues, particularly if the conflict also deepens in scope. Again, we've got to predict what the game here is, and that's very difficult. But I think the early signs are that fuel prices have increased. That is seeing an uplift in ticket prices for airlines amid a time when I guess real wages are starting to slow, and you've got the cost of living really materialising, I guess, across the country. I guess the other thing is some airlines are cancelling routes and they are rerouting. I think generally there's probably more of a sentiment towards routing through Asia rather than the Middle East. But imagine if the conflict ends, and we sort of had this discussion over the break, the Middle East might want to win back some of that share or reassure travellers that they can come back to the Middle East, so they may offer discount airlines, or they might offer a free hotel package, which is something I took advantage of at the end of last year to travel through the Middle East, and therefore other markets might need to compete with that. So I think there are some signs there already, but then that might actually mean that Australians take their holidays at home more relative to overseas, or South Australians take their holidays in the regional areas, assuming you can get fuel, of course, or you might have an EV vehicle, but it might change some of the dynamics initially.
Thank you.
The last thing I'll just add is the biggest, so there's the leisure side and there's the corporate side. I think the biggest tell will be you talk to your corporate clients about what their travel behaviour is right now or what their current mandate is, and when they start putting, nothing changes, or they start to be more selective on what they do, that'll be when the material change happens, because as good as events are, they largely happen on 3 nights a week, not the remainder of the week, which is the bread and butter.
We're not really having a sideshow here, but I'm just going to mention, our organisation hasn't brought anything in, but I do know of another organisation that has actually put a freeze on interstate and international travel, unless it's absolutely critical, because they feel that they should be doing their part with the fuel. That's the marketing side, and then obviously it's keeping costs down. So I guess the longer and deeper the conflict goes on, if you do have to turn to fuel rationing, which the federal government has said they don't need to do that yet, but you may see some corporates, particularly if there's a margin squeeze, you might see some corporates sort of go down that track.
Perfect, thank you. Other questions for Matthew? No, I'm only kidding. Other questions for anyone else? Final thoughts, comments, observations? We're all done, we're all sold. Okay, lovely, thank you. So we'll move toward just wrapping up now. I think we're more or less right on time. I'd like to acknowledge our major event partner, Host Plus, over there in the corner. Go and see them. Say hello. Thank you for your continued support to our keynotes, Bessa and Matthew, to Minister Emily Burke and her new advisor, John. Where's John? Yes, I'm outing you, John. So John is Emily Burke's tourism advisor. So put that face in your brain. He's our contact. So thank you very much for that. Importantly to you all, thank you for taking time out of your afternoon. When we set forward to do this, we are very fortunate to have a very engaged industry advisory committee here at Accommodation Australia, South Australia. I am going to out you all too. So hands in the air if you sit on the industry advisory committee, please. Thank you. Okay. So we all know each other in this industry, and that's fantastic. It means, though, that these wonderful people take time out of their work lives to represent your voices. That works particularly well when there's multiple voices going into them, not only their own voice coming into our committee room, which is great. But chair of our committee is Mr. Andrew Bullock, sitting just to the side, who you met at the start. On that note, we'll thank our friends at the Entertainment Centre, Kate and your wonderful team. Thank you for looking after us. And we will adjourn for drinks and snacks. So that's that. Thank you to everyone and have a great evening. Cheers.